Let us begin with 3 ohms. We begin with page 12, Book 1, Canto 2, The Issue. We have to discuss what this issue is as we go along. But the first line that Sri Aurobindo gives us is, that hour had fallen now on Savitri. Well, we hear Savitri's name constantly, but who is Savitri? Well, Sri Aurobindo, in a letter to a disciple, says, Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun. Goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. So we see now that Savitri has a particular mission to come down and save. And what we are seeing in this canto is what she has to face, because this is a flashback to her union with her answering soul, Satchivan. Sri Aurobindo says that a point she had reached where life must be in vain, or in her unborn element awake, her will must cancel her body's destiny. Now this is very, very interesting, because first of all, how can her will cancel her body's destiny? Only if she defeats death. So she has reached this point in her life. She knows that her husband is going to die in 12 months. She's a young woman, maybe in her late teens. We have to remember that. She's not an old woman. She's very young, maybe 19 or 20 or something like that. And then the rest of her life, she can either follow him into the flames or become a nun. And that was all that was available to women at that time when they lost their husbands. So we see now a point she had reached where life must be in vain. Or, and he has a comma, or in her unborn element awake. Now, what is this unborn element? Sri Aurobindo uses the word as an adjective. And he says, the Jivatman is for me the unborn, who presides over the individual being and its developments, associated with it, but above it and them, and who, by the very nature of his existence, knows himself as universal and transcendent, no less than individual, and feels the divine to be his origin, the truth of his being, the master of his nature, the very stuff of his existence. Savitri is an unborn. She does not have to be born. She's universal. She's the universal mother. Prakriti. So, a point she had reached, where life must be in vain, or in her unborn element awake, her will must cancel her body's destiny. How can this happen? For only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Very, very potent statement. First of all, he uses the word unborn again. So, unborn element awake, and 3 lines later, unborn again. Very important. For only the unborn spirit's timeless power. The unborn spirit is outside of time. Time is not relative to the unborn spirit. And only it can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. We have a yoke. What is that yoke? Well, we know about the oxen when they're yoked to move around and thresh the grain. But a yoke is a burden. And those heavy bars on the oxen are a burden also. So we have a burden here of birth in time because we're going to die. So that is a burden. In fact, every day since the day we were born, we're beginning to die. Now, how can that be changed? For only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. And then he's going to continue and tell us only the self that builds this figure of self. And notice here that the first self is capital S. The second one is lowercase. So he's telling us that only the soul, the self, the true soul, that builds us, this figure of self, only it can raise the fixed, interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities, and keeps still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. Disown the legacy of our buried selves, the burdensome heirship to our vanished forms, accepted blindly by the body and soul. A lot to go through here. We'll take our time. So we know that only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift this yoke, this burden that is imposed on us when we take birth in time. If we don't take birth in time, we're universal. We're united with the divine. We're part of the transcendent Purushottama. So we choose to take birth in time because on this earth, this magnificent, beautiful, greening earth, there is an evolution. And that evolution starts with the fish, goes through the 10 avatars, and it's leading us to a divine life on earth. It's leading us to the conquest of death. And that is the whole of Savitri, given to us right there. So he says, only the self And in the essays on the Gita, he says, the self is our self-existent being. Only the self that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed, interminable line. Now, it is a fixed, interminable line because we have had so many lakhs of births to get here at this point. We have been born and died hundreds of thousands of times to be here in the human body on earth at this great moment of the earth, the greatest moment of the earth, because what Mother and Sri Aurobindo have brought down has never been here before. The possibility of the conquest of death? No, the proof of it. And a divine life on earth? The supramental is going to assure us of that. So, what is this word raise? Can raise the fixed, interminable line. When we raise a building, we implode it so that it collapses completely to the ground. And we say, that was raised to the ground. Can raise the fixed, interminable line. And what is that line? That line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities. Well, why are they oblivious personalities? Because we don't remember our past births. We've forgotten them. So we have these changing names. One day it's Narad, the next day it's Joe. Then these numberless lives. So many lives we've lived to be here in this sanctified atmosphere of the new world. These new oblivious personalities. But then he says, and keeps still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. Very simply, our past. All the things that we've done in the past, and we call that karma, or we call it fate, or in Texas they say, what goes around comes around. So we have many ways of describing fate and karma, but that trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds, actions also, that keeps still lurking in our conscious acts, we have to disown that legacy of our buried selves. We can't say, well, I was a king last time in my birth, and this time I'm a prince only. That's nonsense. Each time we take a birth, we take it for a progress of our own being. And that progress is known as the psychic being, the inner self of us. The greater self of us is eternal, universal, transcendent, and it is always there, but it doesn't take birth. We take birth, and in us, in another passage in Savitri, he says, a being no larger than the thumb of man, hidden deep in the region of the heart. That is our psychic being. In Christianity, it would be called the soul, but it is the psychic being that grows from life to life, gathering all the positive experiences we've had in this life. When we die, the other parts fall away. The body, obviously, is burned or buried. The vital slowly has to give up all that stuff. Only what is left is what has helped us progress in this particular life. It's very important, huh? Very important. This burdensome airship to our vanished forms. Strange line, but very interesting. It is a burdensome thing to see that we are living things that might have happened in a past life and are continuing now. And they're accepted blindly by the body and soul. Sri Aurobindo is going to go on now telling us more about this. He calls it an episode in an unremembered tale. Unremembered tale, all our previous births. Its beginning lost, its motive and plot concealed. Because what is the motive and plot of this present life? Well, for 99.9% of humanity, it's eating, sleeping, procreating, and enjoying life, or having sorrow. But not for us. Our motive and plot is only the progress of the inner being towards the divine consciousness and eventually uniting with it. He says, a once living story has prepared and made our present fate child of past energies. And there's karma. So our present fate, we are reaping the past energies of previous births. Extraordinary. Now,
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
After the death, only the psychic being remains, right?
Only the psychic being goes to its resting place.
Resting place. And that time there is no body, nothing.
Nobody.
No subtle
Correct.
body, nothing, right?
But it only lasts about 2 years, in general, Sri Aurobindo says. And then we take another birth.
Within 2 years.
It's amazing, huh? Amazing that we're only up there for 2 years to gather everything, to gather all that force and everything. And then we choose our parents for the next progress we have to make. We wonder, why did I choose these parents?
I thought the same, yeah.
But
it was very difficult for me. But I thought, this is what I thought, that I choose that parents because I had to pass through there.
yes,
And something.
exactly. So,
Question.
yes.
Is that the proof of death?
Pardon?
What is the proof of conquest over death on earth?
Immortality.
Do we have a proof of immortality?
Not yet, but it's in the supramental. It's there already. Sri Aurobindo left in his 70s because he had to put his body into the earth to establish the supermind. Mother lived another 23 years, not working what we think she was working with. She was working on the cellular consciousness, the transformation of the cells in her body. And she discovered a mind of the cells. And there's a book called Mind of the Cells, written by Satprem. A very fine book, by the way. So we used to hear Mother screaming. I'd stand by the samadhi and hear her voice. But it wasn't the kind of pain that we're understanding. It was the pain of convincing the cells of the body to transform themselves. So immortality could be possible. and Mother did it to a great extent. But when she asked Dr. Bist, can this body live to 100? He said, no, Mother. He said, it's too beaten up. She lived to 95. And she saw hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in those years, sleeping usually 2 hours a night, going to bed maybe at 4 in the morning, writing letters until 4, waking up at 6, and beginning the day again. For years, years and years. Don't forget, Sri Aurobindo gave her the total control of the ashram. All the children, school of education, knowledge, departments, construction, all of these things. That was, Mother had secretaries who would come and inform her of all of these things, and she would give directions, etc. So, back to our story. A once living story has prepared, and made our present fate child of past energies. Now, he's going to tell us more about this cosmos. The fixity of the cosmic sequences, fastened with hidden, inevitable links, she must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's force, her past, a block on the immortal's road, make a raised ground, and shape anew her fate. And here we have the word raised coming up again, twice in so many lines. Now, okay, our present fate is a child of past energies, but this fixity, this state of stability of the cosmic sequences. We know that the stars travel around in a certain sequence, that the earth moves around the sun in a certain sequence. Everything, there's an old black, used to call it Negro, anthem speaking of a wheel in a wheel. The big wheel run by the grace of God, the little wheel run by the hand of man. It's actually a spiritual song. They had seen this. They had actually seen this. It's marvelous. So the fixity of the cosmic sequences, fastened with hidden, inevitable links. They're all linked. Everything is linked. In fact, everything is predestined. We think we have free will. We don't have any free will. Unless we can rise above body, life, and mind into the higher planes of consciousness, beginning with the higher mind, proceeding to the illumined mind, proceeding further to the intuitive mind, and then to the overmind. And from there, which is the second stage, we would have to go to the third stage, which is the supermind, the supramental. Sri Aurobindo calls it the Gnostic. He calls it the real idea also. So, Savitri has to disrupt this whole fixity of the cosmic sequences that are fastened with these hidden, inevitable links. And she has to dislodge by her soul's force her past. Because her past, he says, is a block on the immortal's road. I can tell you personally that I have experienced this time and time again. Things of the past, even the past in this life, are still having their effect negatively upon me now. Why do we get angry? We're divine. Why should anger come in if we're divine? But it comes in because these universal movements, these hidden, inevitable links, these beings that we call asuras, rakshasas, pisachas, are all active in our life. And they can do a bit of damage. Even the little ones can create damage. So she has to make a raised ground. And when that ground is raised totally, she can shape anew her fate. Wow. Now, Sri Aurobindo is going to tell us more about what she's going to face. A colloquy of the original gods. Now, a colloquy is a formal conversation. Savitri has to meet with these original gods, and one of them is death. A colloquy of the original gods, meeting upon the borders of the unknown. Her soul's debate with embodied nothingness must be wrestled out on a dangerous, dim background. Her being must confront its formless cause, against the universe weigh its single self. Lot to talk about. So, who are these gods? Capital G. In the Upanishads, Sri Aurobindo tells us, they are Brahman, representing itself in cosmic personalities. In the essays on the Gita, he says the gods are the great, undying powers and immortal personalities who consciously inform, constitute, preside over the subjective and objective forces of the universe. We could do a whole series on that one line. But they are the personalities and powers of the dynamic divine. So she has to engage with these gods on the borders of the unknown, meeting upon the borders of the unknown. It almost sounds paradoxical. How can you have a border of something unknown? And Sri Aurobindo puts these paradoxes before us time and time again, so our consciousness can raise up a little bit and not just say with the stupid mind, oh, that's a paradox, it's meaningless. It's not. It's paradoxical, but it has powerful meaning because she's meeting upon the borders of the unknown, and she has to debate with her soul embodied nothingness. Again, a paradoxical statement. How can nothingness be embodied? You see how Sri Aurobindo is trying to lift us to a slightly different vision than this simple mind can hold. And everything has to be wrestled out on a dangerous, dim background. This dangerous, dim background is the cosmos. Her being must confront its formless cause. Now, that is very important. To confront against something is to encounter it, to go up against it. Now, her being, Savitri's being, must confront its formless cause. Now, a cause is something that happens or exists in such a way that something specific happens. It can be a basis also for action or response. So we see that Savitri has had a formless cause. That cause was to take birth in a human body. And taking that birth in a human body very often, I would say almost always, we forget when we come down as a baby. What do we know? We know nothing. We know the mother's breast. We now have babies with hair. We have babies whose eyes are open when they're born. So there is a big evolutionary push there. But the baby knows nothing. So her being has to confront its formless cause, the reason why she came to earth, to save, as Sri Aurobindo says. And she has to do all of this against the universe. She has to weigh her single self. I'll go on a little bit more because this I can't break here. On the bare peak, where self is alone with naught, and life has no sense, and love no place to stand, she must plead her case upon extinction's verge. In the world's death cave, uphold life's helpless claim, and vindicate her right to be and love. So we'll go through all of that now. We have this scene, huh? She's there debating with embodied nothingness. She's has to wrestle this whole thing out on a dangerous, dim background. Her being has to confront its formless cause. It has to weigh its single self against the universe. The universe will say, "What? You're nothing. You're a speck of dust." So Savitri has to weigh against the universe, weigh its single self. Now, he speaks of this bare peak where self, again, capital S, the soul, is alone with naught. Now, he spells naught, N-O-U-G-H-T, and very often naught in British English is spelled N-A-U-G-H-T, but it's the same thing. So, he says the self is being, not a being. By self is meant the conscious, essential existence, one in all, from his letters on yoga. So, she's on this bare peak now, where self, her soul, is alone with naught. And on that bare peak, in this vastness, this timeless, spaceless vastness, life has no sense there. And love has no place to stand. And there she has to plead her case upon extinction's verge. Now here we have the edge of extinction again. And in the world's death cave, uphold life's helpless claim and vindicate her right to be and love. Now, why is Sri Aurobindo telling this to us? Because he's saying that Savitri has to confront death. Death is a god. And death tells her, when we get into those latter books, I'm supreme. Something that is born has to die. And Savitri says, I'm here. I am the light. And she will conquer death eventually. There's that great line in Savitri, his body was eaten by light. Oh, death's body was eaten by light. So, but we're not there yet. So, in this world's death cave is our own death. She has to uphold this helpless claim of life. And I'm with my Savitri Sunday group. I'm now in this Godhead's of the greater life. And we see that there are beings there that want to live and beings that don't really want to live. And these beings have to try to find a way to continue to exist. And so they interact with Earth. But that's for another time. Yes.
On the bare peak where self is alone with naught, is that he here represents or refer to infinite, not?
Yes, naught is the infinite there. Yeah, it's the blankness of space, the absolute emptiness of all space. And she's standing now on that peak because that's where she's going to meet death. And life has no sense, love, no place to stand there in that emptiness. And she has to plead her case upon this verge of extinction because everything that's born dies. Nature is creating and destroying at every moment. And anyone who's involved in nature, in gardening, horticulture, we see it happening at every moment. Something is being born, something dies. So we had the great Tyrannosaurus and all of these great beings. When their time was over, something new came. They were extinguished. So nature, that's her work. By a slow progression, she's leading us where yoga can lead us far more rapidly. Altered must be nature's harsh economy. So nature has a very harsh economy, and it has to be altered. We have to find a life divine on earth. We have to conquer falsehood. We have to bring truth into our own being and into our collective. We have to learn to live in light and not in sorrow and pain. And therefore, altered must be nature's harsh economy. I'll go a little bit more into page 13.
How tough. It's real tough to.
It's very tough
Very tough.
because we're beginning to see how much the Divine Mother has to face. Acquittance she must win from her past's bond. What is a bond? The past tense of bind. So she has this bond that's of the past. Acquittance, she has to release herself from a debt or obligation to the past. An old account of suffering exhaust. Strike out from time the soul's long compound debt. Now we know about compound in money. It keeps earning money, and our compound debt also keeps growing. And then he says, and the heavy servitudes of the karmic gods. Now he tells us about karma. The heavy servitudes. We are slaves of karma until we can get past our past and our inhibitions and our negative habits. And then he says, the slow revenge of unforgiving law and the deep need of universal pain and hard sacrifice and tragic consequence. We'll cover those last lines next time because this has been a difficult one. Okay. Namaste all. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste.